Alrighty, welcome to another episode of the Three Ventures podcast. Today I have some of our leadership team here with us, and we're going to be talking about Google phasing out third-party cookies in favor of first-party cookies broadly across the internet and the Chrome browser. So today with me I have Susan Winograd, our CMO. She also leads a lot of our advertising teams here at Three Ventures, and Greg Albright, our head of marketing, analytics, and insights. So, Greg, I want to kick it over to you first. Third-party cookies going away. Problem, not a problem?
Like all things, I just see them as an opportunity to be able to update what you know you want from a tracking perspective and use that to your advantage. So there's not really anything you can do about it, so I prefer to just look at it as an opportunity.
Internet that streams.
Oh, very nice. Well, Susan, what about you on the advertising side? Problem or not a problem?
I think it depends on the company, to be honest with you. If you're a company that experienced the privacy update of iOS 14, you've been through something like this with Facebook, I don't think it's going to be as ground shifting because a lot of places sort of kicked off the awareness that we can't rely on platforms to track people forever. So I think there's been an awareness. I think what's going to be interesting is if you're a business that didn't go through that or doesn't rely on Facebook and you are comfy cozy with the Google Ads tracking that you've had for the past 10 years, it might be a little more uncomfortable for you.
Yeah, I could agree with that. I mean, there are some businesses that come to mind who aren't necessarily comfy and cozy, or who have been, I should say. And I would argue that a lot of them are more of a complicated sales process type of lead gen, B2B type of client, or a longer type of sales process with e-commerce or complicated e-commerce where it's kind of lead gen and e-commerce at the same time. But Alka, you work a lot with all of the technical data. What's the biggest issue that comes to your mind with some of those longer sales cycle businesses with third-party cookies going away?
Well, the biggest problem is, of course, that if somebody arrives at your site via Google Ads or Facebook Ads on the 1st of the month, and they make the purchase the next month, somewhere the next month, you have no way of knowing where they came from, right? That's basically the whole problem with third cookies going away and with Apple blocking a lot of the duration of first-party cookies also. But it's definitely, I think, an opportunity. We've been giving away a lot of data to Facebook, to Google Ads. Companies have been giving away all their customer data. And why not take that data and use it for your own good?
I agree with that. I agree with that totally. So,
just to piggyback on what Alka said, I think the other reason why this is an important opportunity for everybody is that the days of getting a free lunch are now over. You used to be able to get all these free tools like Tag Manager and Analytics that used to be able to do a whole lot of work for you and were free in terms of getting this mass volume of data processed free, reported on, and fairly easy to use dashboards that you could then also send to other places, and all of that was fairly easy to use, but all free. That day is over. Google doesn't want to pay for your processing anymore. It doesn't want to pay to show you either data sent via an API, which the GA4 API is not still robust enough like the UA was. And so you have to do this yourself now. So it's all about you owning your data. And I think one of the things that we're going to talk about is owning that responsibility, owning that opportunity, and owning the ownership of your data. And that being the opportunity that's presenting for you. What that also does, though, is it allows you to make things a lot more streamlined, efficient, and maybe easy. Most companies don't need the fire hose of data that they're getting from Google or Adobe, right? Google sends over like 120, 130 different metrics and segments. No one uses that. Even data nerds like us don't look at a fraction of that stuff, right? There's like ad type network of this and this thing in this segment, and no one ever looks at that. Well, you're going to pay for that in the future. It's going to be a hassle to have to manage and deal with. So just use this as an opportunity to update your measurement framework. It's something we can talk about more, but update your measurement framework, only collect what you need, only focus on those things, and then that way you have a much more streamlined approach to knowing what you're going to need from a first-party data perspective and how that will impact ads, your marketing automation tools, etc.
So what I kind of hear you saying there too is with the first party data, it's really about your audiences, their attributes, attribution, and any type of key behaviors they have along their purchasing or sort of customer lifecycle journey. I mean, it doesn't seem like it'd be too much more complicated than that. But I think the words of customer journey and as well as attribution scare a lot of people. So have there been any sort of low barrier, lower cost to entry solutions that have been coming out with starting to own your own data, whether it's a new platform or an approach, et cetera? I know, Greg and Alka, that was something you have been working on. I wanted to kick that over to you two first.
Well, one of them is the consent management platforms, and I'll let Alka expand on that around their importance. But A, they're being required in a lot of different places. But B, what they allow you to do is use some of Google's tools to fill in the gaps for what it thinks it knows about your audience, right? And so it's going to use machine learning and AI to make assumptions, I bet they're pretty accurate, about what it's inferring from data. So it's going to say, hey, of the people who accepted cookies and converted, I'm going to find some similarities to the people that said, I don't want to accept your cookies and converted. And it's going to fill in some gaps about what it knows from the people who said no, using the people who did, and I'm sure 1,000 other things that are in Google's black box somewhere. But that's a free tool for now. It's an important tool. It's going to be a required tool. And I think, Alka, from your perspective, when we think about consent management tools, most of the clients that we work with, I think you would agree, know that they need it and are in some place in getting it set up. But what have you seen to be some of the barriers for implementing those consent management tools that you think people would find a little easier to use if they knew more about it?
Yeah, I mean, on the outside, they seem fairly easy to implement. They offer a lot of tools for clients just to get started right away. Everything is pre-filled. The text on the banner is ready for you, etc. But for it to work well with, for example, a tool like Google Tag Manager Consent Mode, which is a tool you were speaking about, which basically allows Google to track if somebody clicks no, doesn't click, or gives permission, and based on that they can model all the conversions that you might miss. Then they know, okay, 10 people accepted the cookie, 90 people didn't. We were tracking of those 10 people, we were tracking 2 conversions. We probably missed X amount of conversions of the people that just didn't give us permission to track them. And these kind of details are what are very important. What are very important when you're tracking for your marketing campaigns. And there's a lot of details there that can quite easily be missed by if you just follow the tutorial on your consent tool.
Well, that's pretty interesting because not only is that just hitting conversion tracking, but it also seems like it hit remarketing and retargeting, which are, really big pieces of media mix for any type of mature company. Susan, what have been the implications you've seen on that?
It was actually a pretty big hit on the Facebook side because the way Facebook's consent started working was essentially, even if you said yes, you can track me, the longest length of time now is 7 days. And I come from the old school where we had like a 28-day retargeting bucket. We had a 14-day. We'd exclude the 14-day from the 28. Like we had this whole complicated setup. And once iOS 14 started rolling out and people started opting out of that tracking, you saw the retargeting like shrink. I mean, when all the stuff that you had set up before, the audience size was smaller. And the other thing that we ran into, which I'm assuming that these would be the same issues that you would probably run into with Google, but because the audience was so small, if you were going in and saying, hey, Facebook, I want you to optimize for conversions or sales, it had, 30% of the data feedback that it used to. So it also struggled with making those connections about who is most likely to convert. So it was kind of a dual-sided problem. You had a smaller audience, and then it was less smart, I guess, for lack of a better term. because it didn't have the data that it used to have in order to optimize to people that were likely to buy. So you kind of got a 1-2 punch with it. And the remarketing audience size really never recovered. I mean, Facebook got smarter. The algorithm kind of learned how to backfill and make some assumptions, kind of like what we were just talking about, but the size has stayed smaller. So it's been something where, I think that there's a frustration with companies just because I've had to explain, look, we can set up a remarketing audience, but some of these people are going to be in your top of funnel stuff. I mean, there's no way for the platform to know that they're not. And so I think that's been difficult, especially, in the clients that we deal with, which are long-term, demand gen B2B. There are a lot of steps and all of that happening. So the remarketing really has become a tough thing for them because they don't have a way to know who they're talking to if they rely on remarketing from the platform.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And then also it sort of begs the point of, once they're in your funnel, you should really be using your CRM with email and some other items, SMS, et cetera, on really doing the follow-up, trying to move them down to the deeper portions of the each stage of the sales funnel.
Yeah.
I think another really important aspect to bring up here too, and Greg, to your point is, Facebook, it really went from mobile app to web browser. Through all the advertisements, and basically Apple came in the middle and said, no, we're not going to give you a unique identifier so that you could pass that unique identifier about who this person is to the browser. Where what's much different about Chrome with third-party cookies going away is not only does Google own the browser, but they're likely to own your Google account that you have logged in on your browser. And then so many other websites use Google platforms, Google Analytics, Tag Manager, etc. They're probably going to have a much higher ability to do that stitching of people who gave consent versus people who didn't give consent in comparison to Facebook. So I think that's a good point to bring up here too as well. So from an advertising perspective, retargeting is probably definitely going to get hit. But on the flip side, it seems like a lot of the platforms, Google Ads, Facebook, HubSpot, et cetera, they're already making updates to their tracking code to switch their tracking from third party to first party. So I think a good point here too is if you haven't updated your tracking scripts lately, reach out to the teams or the people who you need to do that to just make sure you're on the current versions of those tracking scripts. Alka, I had a question for you. On the attribution side of things for, some of our clients that are, some more B2B demand gen, longer sales cycle type of oriented, what are some of the approaches and problems that they are trying to address with owning their own attribution, given the fact that all these third-party cookies are going away?
Yeah, of course. So I think first, it's good to tell you a bit about how Google solves it, and then how you can replicate it in your own data warehouse, for example, because there's really a whole scope of things that you can do, right from like just a quick fix to like the perfect situation where you have a data warehouse that communicates with your CRM, etc. So the way Google does this is with their enhanced conversions, right? And that goes back to what you mentioned about different touch points over a certain time period. Let's say I go to your website, I subscribe to your email, and then 2 months later I make a purchase, and then 4 months later you send me a text message, and I click on the link in a text message. Those are 3 touch points, and without third-party cookies or first-party cookies that last longer than 7 days, it's going to be very difficult to track that over that period of time. The solution Google has for that is by just taking that email and comparing that with the email that is used 2 months later. And that's something that you can replicate, not easily, but you can replicate that in your own data warehouse, for example. You can just collect all that information. You collect the email when somebody subscribes to the newsletter. You collect when somebody makes a purchase. You collect the phone number when you send a text message and somebody clicks on that links. You collect all that information and you turn it into, it's called an identity graph, but basically it's just a file that just has all the information about a customer or a potential customer. And because you have all that information, you can easily say, okay, this person that visited 3 weeks ago, we don't have a cookie telling us that it's the same person that visited us three weeks later, but they have the same email address, so it's probably the same person. So you can take that information into your data warehouse, maybe enrich it with additional information that you have on your servers, like customer lifetime value, purchase behavior, etc. Pull all of that together, and from there you can send that information whenever a new conversion happens to Facebook, to Google, or information back to your CRM, to HubSpot, to Salesforce, just to enrich the data in those CRM tools also.
Yep. And one of the key pieces that we are helping clients unpack and discover the art of the possible with is just how that process should look. So if your CRM is your source of truth, it's making sure that that process is integrated with your CRM. And then ingested into the data warehouse from a reporting perspective, versus trying to ingest all the data into the data warehouse and then, backfill it into your CRM. So it depends on, what platforms you work with, what are some of the capabilities and limitations of those platforms. But in almost every case, it seems to be that the best reporting and the best solutions for attribution for B2B demand gen clients, that reporting is stood up on top of the data warehouse. And that data warehouse has all of their data integrated, not only from all their customer records or their CRM, but that those platforms are also ingesting as much of the necessary data as possible from all their advertising campaigns and initiatives such as Facebook, LinkedIn, Google Ads, etc. Does this sort of bring up the next, existential question, which is, do cookies ever go away, in your opinion? Greg, I wanted to ask you.
Do cookies ever go away? I don't think so. I think they'll just come in different forms. I think for people, they're going to find different ways of being able to identify what they need. And I think all these tools that are out there are making so much money that the people that are spending it with them are going to say, I've got to have something to use. So maybe it's not a cookie, but it's a pie or a cake, right? They're going to come up with some other thing that you're going to use, because these, especially advertisers and larger accounts, are going to require some type of visibility into what this is and what's happening. And so I think we're just seeing a step along the process of that iteration. The one thing that I wanted to bring up that this is exposing, and Alka mentioned that with us as well, a lot of the questions that we get around cookies and audiences and CRMs has to do with the fact that most teams set up a CRM simply so they can send email automations, right? So they can set up drip campaigns, and they're like, hey, I know this person, but it's really just to get them from lead to like a qualified sales lead. Because then once I dump them over to the sales team, I'm done with them, I can move on. And so it's just emails out, drip campaigns, etc. They've not really looked at it from a perspective of, this is my single source of truth for everything that I know about this customer from birth until death. They've never looked at it from that perspective. And so what this is forcing them to do is actually do that. They need to see it from a perspective of, who do I bring in here that maybe they're not a lead yet, that I can tell my sales team about because they're on me about the quality of sales leads. But I need to bring them in as opportunities, or like people that are kicking the tires. And I need to append to them a lot more information than I had in the past, because Google, or mostly Google, would let me keep that in there and I could keep it separate. Can't have that anymore. You certainly don't want to send data back to Google Analytics about your customer attributes anymore like we used to. A, they're not going to let you. B, you may never get it back. And so the CRM has to serve as your source of truth. And so what this will expose for the people is the fact that it will determine and dictate to them how well they've actually known their audience, right? KYA is kind of used in a lot of different industries, and marketing, how well you know your audience in the B2B space is very important, because then it's going to dictate what else you're going to want to save. Because when you lose data, it'll expose those holes. Like, hey, we don't have this anymore in Google. It's gone. Well, we used to be able to do it. Let's do it in HubSpot. Let's use it with other tools. And so the setup that Alka talked about, which is streaming everything to a data warehouse, making sure you have that raw data, and then sending it back and forth to a CRM to use as your source of truth becomes vital. And the people who then have the add-ons to those, like a CDP or reverse ETLs or those other tools, so that you can start sending data to marketing automation tools that somehow may be separate from your CRM, that's like a third level above, right? Now we're like in advanced mode, but it's still even more important that you are collecting the data that you need and sending it to those places. Because now you always want to know that what you have in those other tools matches your source of truth, so that when you are reporting on things, talking to your sales team, building email lists, talking to your Google ads, all those things where it crosses over, you're all on the same page from the perspective of what that person's done recently, where they are in a sales cycle, all those types of things. So it requires conversations with sales teams. It requires conversations with your paid search, with your marketing automation. Those teams typically don't talk to each other a whole lot about who's our audience, what is their profile, what are the important things to capture and build. And I hope this is a way for more people to do that, because it enriches the data, makes it more valuable, and you're going to get more value out of all these tools if you do it.
Greg, the facilitator. Susan, it makes your life easy, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, that was always one of the things that I've always been pro, is I always tell people that even if you're doing like a tactical thing, like if you're just there for paid search, it's still so helpful to listen into sales calls and talk to the sales team more, because you learn so much about what people actually object to that you should probably be addressing all the way in the ad copy. So to Greg's point, I like that this has the potential to open up those conversations, because at a lot of organizations, it can be very friction filled, where it's like, marketing is like, look, we're driving the leads. We don't know. We can't do anything after that. And sales is like, well, the quality's not good. But there's never, I don't want to say never, but there's very commonly not sort of criteria that they can both agree to. You know what I mean? It's the salespeople judge the leads one way, the marketing judges the leads the other way. And those two things have sometimes been disparate at places I've worked with. So I do like that this sort of creates a common language among what are these people actually doing? Is their value realized over time? And just because they didn't sign up for a demo that day, does that mean that it's a bad lead? I think it'll help those conversations become a little more nuanced and enriched, as opposed to just kind of being, well, these are our sales goals, these are our marketing goals, and sometimes those things just don't work.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And also, when you consider, what are the marketing goals and what are the sales goals and what are the business goals, having congruency between those. And my mind goes down to every company is becoming a software company, because you have to have the software to run your business. And every company is becoming a data company, which means you should have a data model which is congruent between your advertising, your CRM platforms, your analytics platforms, your reporting platforms. There should be that congruency between them, because that's really what facilitates the conversation between sales and marketing, between marketing and IT, that removes that friction. So, you can own your attribution data and not have to rely on these wonderful platforms of third-party cookies. And then you can own the information and the reporting to help facilitate those conversations amongst those teams. And I think that's one of the things we do extremely well here at Three Ventures, is we are the Sherpa of taking the business operations, the vision, the goals, the direction, and helping create that consistency in the data model across all of their marketing, IT, and sales platforms. So one of the things I think we do extremely well here at Three Ventures, that's why the B2B demand gen space is one of our strongest niches. And with that said, appreciate you all tuning in and listening. We'll wrap it up here with some closing thoughts, but I believe that talks off everything we had today for third-party cookies going away, yeah?
Yep.
Thank you, guys.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.